Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Greetings. As always, today, our episode is brought to you by the Life Force Academy. Hey, if you haven't checked out Life Force Academy yet, and you could use something to help you have good energy in your body on a consistent basis, clarity, intuitive clarity of the mind. Life Force Academy, Kundalini yoga practices, classes, something for everyone. Whether you never ever tried it before, you're a seasoned practitioner, there's something for everyone. And Life Force Academy is a simple way of keeping us connected to our genuine sense of purpose, our genuine sense of inner vitality, our genuine sense of happiness. So Life Force Academy, you can try it out. If you just go to lifeforce.yoga, type that URL into your browser, lifeforce.yoga, and you can start 14-day trial for just $1, Life Force Academy. Everyone also check out the Comes a Time podcast from our friends OTEIL and Mike. OTEIL is the guest on the podcast today. You're about to hear from him. And their podcast, Comes a Time, is one of my favorites. And before the episode is over, today I'll share some of my favorite episodes from their podcast. So definitely, if you haven't already subscribed to the Comes a Time podcast, go over there and do that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Really appreciate you being here. Check out Life Force Academy, check out Comes a Time, and enjoy today's episode. Greetings, everyone. This is Jai Dave. And wow, I'm excited for you to hear the episode today, this conversation with my special guest, the great OTEIL Burbridge. Many of you know him, of course. Plays bass with the Dead and Company. Longtime bass player with the Allman Brothers Band, Aquarian Rescue Unit with Colonel Bruce Hampton. You're going to hear about all of that. Really, it's a conversation of mysticism, of music, of love, of God, of all the cool things, and really, really enjoyed this conversation. I think you're going to as well. OTEIL and I connected a little bit about a year or so ago, but this was the first time we were able to really dive in and have a great substantive conversation, and I loved it. Right out the gate, it just flowed. Really a joy. He's such a beautiful brother. Not only is he, one of the great bass players on the planet and a musical hero of mine, and I've had so many nights on Dead Tour of just benefiting and enjoying and being uplifted by his talent and getting inspiration. And part of that is his really beautiful heart, and I think that comes through here. Not only a talent, musical talent, but the aura, the heart, the love, the sweetness, the gentleness, the kindness, and the intelligence. And so I think probably a lot of that comes through, and it certainly did for me. We talk about so many cool things, his experiences with Colonel Bruce. If you don't know anything about him, just wait. It's a really cool story. Some experiences with the Allman Brothers, how the Grateful Dead, playing with the Grateful Dead, has shaped his life and his perspective on music and life itself, and lots of other stuff. I can't even remember it all. It's just a really fun conversation. So thanks everyone for listening. Thank you to OTEIL. Definitely check out his podcast, Comes a Time, and enjoy the conversation, friends.
Good to see you, man.
You too, man. I'm so glad we're doing this and we can just chat.
For sure. I'm trying to think if I had, I think I made some notes. I saw a podcast. No, I don't have them in here. A podcast you did with this lady, and it was so compelling, and I was just like,
what was it about?
You gotta call him. I can't remember now. I thought I made notes on it,
Right.
Because
I do that too. I do that all the time.
I think I wrote it down on a piece of paper, actually.
Was it an Indian woman?
No, it was a white lady, I think.
Astrology? Were we talking astrology?
Maybe I think that was it. It was different kinds of astrology.
Oh, yeah, Vedic astrology versus Western astrology.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's what I spend most of my time. You know, when I have free time, these days, but for me, during the pandemic, it really blossomed. Like, I've always been into it and loved it, but never had the time in my recent, years to to really deep dive and
go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I like most of us, I'm really suffering in a lot of ways last couple of years, and so having something like astrology to have perspective on our suffering, to me is it's like a treasure.
I when I was really young, my mentor, Colonel Bruce Hampton, one of them, he's the best at astrology. He was also incredibly psychic too. And he always knew what the moon was in. And he would always joke me, "You're Virgo with Pisces moon, just like Michael Jackson. You're all emotional and Cancer rising." Yeah. So he would, because he always knew what sign the moon was in and what phase the moon was in, he would let me know, it's going to be a rough ride. Moon's at full in Pisces or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. It was like,
he's giving you giving you the weather report.
Exactly, and it really helped. And when he died, like, just not having that around, but he did train this one girl, well, she actually studied with his teacher, but I didn't know all the different kinds of astrology.
Well, man, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually one of the main things I wanted to ask you about was Colonel Bruce. Because I've heard you tell the stories. I listened to your podcast a good bit, so I've heard you tell many stories of him, and I, of course, I knew of him a little bit. I never listened to his music really, and I found out about Aquarian Rescue Unit more recently through just knowing about you. Yeah. And so I haven't gone back yet and checked that stuff out. However, when I heard you say that he predicted your birth, or he not predicted, but he told you your birth time by a couple minutes, right?
3 minutes off.
Yeah, just right
didn't
when you
know
met.
my last name.
Right. So
I was like, wow.
I know, and when you told that, I know your chart a little bit, because that's that's what I'm into, is astrology. So you said your birth time on there. I was like, oh, I wrote it down and checked it out.
Because I want to hear what it is in Vedic astrology. I'm so glad you did that, because I'm like, to me, I feel like, and you could confirm for me if this is correct, I feel like this is the way in a lot of things, that it's like a prism. Like, if you turn it this way and you're looking at it from that angle, then it's one. If you turn it from that way, you're looking at that angle. Yeah,
that's beautiful, man. I've never heard it described like that, but I think that's exactly what it is. And I often describe it as kind of similar. I'm saying, you're just looking at it from a different angle of, say, even the sky, and that's kind of what you are doing. You're looking at the same thing from another angle. And even within all the different systems of astrology, there's different systems within the systems. Like in Vedic astrology, there's endless ways to look at your chart, and it can be totally infinitely complicated to the point where it's I don't even care about that. So I like to more keep it simple, but look at, more macrocosmically. I'm not so much into predictions and that type of thing, but I love it to understand the language of nature. And
the influences. I mean, I've told people, I'm like, come on. So the moon, every emergency room and police department tracks the phases of the moon, because when the moon is full, violent crimes go up, sex crimes go up. My mom worked emergency room. Farmers, everybody. So none of the other planets have any influence? Come on. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Of
it's
course,
illogical.
So the next step to that is if they're, track when the moon is conjunct Saturn, because that's going to happen once a month. When the moon is conjunct Jupiter, you're probably going to have a more pleasurable night. It's going to be a little less intense. And this type of thing. I do that with teaching. Whenever I teach a class, I always look at what the moon is doing, where the moon is.
Yeah. Well, Bruce was into gambling, so.
Oh, really? That's
He would use. I'll never forget we were at the track one time.
Horse racing?
I think, was this dogs or horses? I can't remember because I was so against like tracks and stuff. He dragged me out there, and he bet against this a long shot, and the horse was like 4-1 supposed to win. He's like, the moon's and whatever. He's gonna die 3/4 of the way through the race, you know. And so he's like, sure enough, the race, I'm like, this horse is gonna kill you, man. He goes, here it comes, and sure, all of a sudden, for no reason, the horse just faded back, and his long shot horse just.
No way.
He knew what sign the horse. I was like, he just got up, went to collect that money. I was like, God.
That's killer.
It's so funny, man.
You know, there's a famous mystic from. Well, he's kind of underground famous mystic from India named Vimalananda. There's a series of books called Agora, which I think you would love, man. Because
I'm gonna write it down.
They're really trippy, and but Agora is often it's described as the left-hand path of God, more tantric, more a little darker, and yeah, me too, man, and. Vimalananda was like a great master across the board, and also astrologer. And he was really into horse racing, and that's what he did all the time. Was they would go to the racetrack and do the same thing. So that's so cool, Colonel Bruce. I'm so fascinated by this guy, like, because do you know that's a known city also in India? City's like a power to be able to know somebody's birth time. That's a known.
And he had it. It was like he used a number of different things. It wasn't all intuitive. There was body features, and then he said for some reason he could do Asians better than anyone because their physical features.
Right.
For some reason,
he could see.
He said I could just get him right to the minute almost, you know, and so when I was like, okay, August 24th, maybe you're psychic. How did you do 2 a.m, and I was born at 1:57. He goes, your nose was screaming it. I was like, what does that mean, you know? He's like, well, your nose and blah, blah, blah. That's Cancer rising, which is 2 a.m, and I'm Cancer rising. I was just like, okay, I don't know what's going on right now.
Yeah,
but I know I'm going to be spending a lot of my time with you.
That's really cool. Yeah, I have some friends who can kind of like get to that point to where they know the mathematics of the astrology so well that they can pretty much know like what was the ascendant at the time you were born without like I have to look at a computer program to do that. But
yeah.
But I'm not a mathematically oriented person.
And he was like Rain Man, just the pleasure, his extreme pleasure. I would see he would be looking at a newspaper, and it would be like baseball or whatever. It'd just be huge pages full of numbers, and he would just be like in his flow state. You know? It's great.
That's killer. And so what did you learn? Like, I'm just sure you learned so much from him, but like when you like go back to that time in your life when you were around him a lot, like how old were you when you met him?
I met him when I was, I think maybe even 24, deeply confused, just absolutely drowning in the Cancer rising and Pisces moon. My chart's all mud. So I could be very depressed, but it's very fertile too, just like mud, you know? And I was just lost, totally just afraid of the world and just like, and I met this crazy person, you know? And he had this album called Basically Frightened. And it was kind of a joke. It's like, I'm basically frightened of, you know, Jesse Helms or whatever, you know, just like kind of silly jokes, but I got it. And I was like, I'm basically, he was like, if you're not basically frightened, you're insane.
Right.
You know, like this, you should be scared. Look at what's going on. This is nuts. Right. And I was like, okay, so it's not me. He's like, no, they tell you you're crazy, but he said in a way, I wish I could describe it the exact way that he said it, but basically he was saying you have to go crazy on your terms and don't let them drive you crazy. Like if you're crazy, then be crazy, but be it.
Right.
Like, you know, like figure out
like
what it is.
Be in control of it in a certain way.
Be your crazy. Yeah, because they're going to pin you that way anyway.
Choose your crazy.
Yeah. So, and I was like, okay. And then, so a lot of it was him basically trying to show me what all the mystics, and he would use Sun Ra,
Love that.
blues cats, or like it was a lot of avant-garde. They weren't I don't believe they're avant-garde. I believe they're like aliens that realize their alien nature.
Yeah.
Or angels that realize it, and the world breaks them.
Like a Sun Ra, and who else comes to mind?
Cecil Taylor, Ornette Coleman, James Blood Ulmer, a host of blues guys, like old blues guys.
Yeah.
Like I remember hearing Pine Top Perkins, and he's playing in this cracked, almost somebody might consider it avant-garde, but it's just not in the lines. And it sounded just like Sun Ra. I heard the jazz and the blues meet back in this Delta blues. I mean, Sun Ra's from the 20s, born in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was like, oh my God, they're people just like you, Colonel Bruce. They're just cracked humans that are more than just human. Like, we're all more than just animal, right? And so I was like, well, how do I do that? And so he had all these techniques to get you out of these self-confined. We're all in a matrix. We create this matrix, and we agreed to what was created when we got here, and just go along with it. So he would just be like, if I put a piece of blue tape right here on my cheek, I can upset this whole street corner. Because that's all I did was I just put a piece. I didn't do anything. But watch here. And I'm just going to sit here, and people would just get bugged out. I was like, so who's crazy?
Right.
He's like, all I did was do this, and everybody's freaking out. Like, why? I just stepped this much to the side of your agreed upon whatever. So he would do shit like say, okay.
Like trickster wisdom.
I guess, very much. Very much. He always said, when I'm lying, I'm telling the truth, and when I'm telling the truth, I'm lying.
Yeah, I love that.
And there's a great quote. Please let me find it. I just heard the other day, and this is from a UFO podcast.
Oh, cool.
But it was from Francis Bacon. This should be it. Francis Bacon. Truth is so hard to tell, it sometimes needs fiction to make it plausible.
Okay, say it one more time.
Truth is so hard to tell, it sometimes needs fiction to make it plausible.
Yes, definitely.
See, I have this thing about religions where I'm like, I was so anti-religious because of my dad, and my mom grew up Catholic, and it was just horrible in New York City in the 30s. And so they rejected all of it. My mom kept the mysticism, but my dad just rejected the whole thing, right? So I grew up like against all that from my dad's side, but kind of believing in that mystical thing from my mom's side. And when I hit bottom at, I guess, like 30, it was right at 40. And I just reached out to God because I was at the bottom and I had run out, and I was like, I'm done, dude. Like, this is.
So you said you're around 40 at this point?
Yeah.
So at this point, you're a long-time touring musician. You had the whole
Allman Brothers.
Bruce, yeah.
The whole had.
So you had already hit
more money than I ever thought I would make.
You already
all
hit
the time
your
in
success.
And perfectly miserable at the top and bottom at the same time.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, I'm so done. And like, I literally heard these voices talk to me, and they said, we're here for you. And I was just like, what? And I was so relieved, like desperate in this 1 minute, and then relieved in that very same instant, that I didn't think to question if I was crazy or not. Right? Now, I got all this from my mom because my mom said, she told me this much later. I've been telling you since you were a baby. All you have to do is ask. I wrote a song called that after this experience, and it culminated in transforming my life. And she goes, don't remember. I wanted her to hear this song. Don't remember I tell you that since you were a baby? I was like, wow.
All you have to do is ask?
Yeah. And that seed she planted in me since a baby, when I was desperate, I poured the water on it, and it jacking the beanstalk all the way up. And they were like, we're here. And I was like, okay. So I just started asking them questions.
Really?
I said, well, why didn't you come before? They said, you didn't ask the right way. And I knew immediately. I was like, They said, yeah, you weren't humble.
Wow.
You know how in the Bible where Jesus has done all these miracles and they come and they go, give me a sign. He's like, didn't I just do this and that? Like, look in the mirror, look at the flowers, look at like what you need is, I'm not here to do tricks. I'm not here to prove something to you. They didn't ask him the right way.
You had to be brought to your knees to get there.
And I asked the right way. Please, I'm done. I can't do this. So there's humility. You came to the end of your ego, right? They just put me in my place immediately. And then they started telling me things. And then at one point they said, you should probably take a break. This is a little bit much. And I went and got in the shower. And then they did something to me in the shower. And I heard yesterday this something, who is this guy? Talking about Schopenhauer. Something about the void. Like I saw that. This dark vastness, and then all this stuff came rushing out of me.
Wow.
And I wasn't tempted by anything for like a year and a half. I quit smoking pot for like almost 2 years just to see if I was a slave to it. I started studying theology very deeply. I had studied a lot of the Bible coming from my dad's end, trying to like disprove, well, why does it say this if it says this?
Right.
And they said, go back and everything, look for God's truth in it and you'll find it. Keep an open mind, be humble. Don't come in like, just do it for yourself, right? And so all religions, I feel, have these truths in them that are the things, the only things that can turn our lives around because, and it doesn't have to be in the religion. It's just their stories. You know, religions are stories and poems and songs. And they're saying that reality is like this, and science says reality is like this and gives you an equation. It's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, right. And
so all the like scientific materialists, I'm like, what's the other side of your brain for? Ask your logical left brain, what's half of the whole other ball game for? You're just going to throw it out? Like it doesn't. And this side cannot help you when you're addicted or brokenhearted or you can't think your way out of that shit, you know?
Well, look at in our society, generally speaking, how much do we value the artists of our society? Not so much. We do value it, but we don't reflect that value in how hard it is to be an artist and to have enough to feed your family or to have a family or to feed yourself for that matter and to have a place to live. You know, versus you go the scientist route, like that's something where our commerce and our money goes in that direction, and my money doesn't go in the direction of artists, except for rare exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you get a Miles Davis or a Picasso or a Salvador Dali. It's like, I'm going to get paid while I'm alive, not long after I'm dead.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're able to like master those two things at the same time. But, as much as we need art, it's amazing how this culture, it's only for entertainment. So then when it's for my entertainment, it's just consumer. And so the easiest art to consume, which I don't even know if it's really art, gets the most money.
Right.
I'm like, watch the stuff on like,
I know.
The dumbest TV shows that have so much money, and here are these people making this incredible music or film or whatever, and they can't get any kind of sponsor. It's just sponsorship. It's just like, wow. But that's okay. I think that's part of like, what yuga are we in? Like this is the time for it, right?
Yeah. Well, there's lessons in all of it, and it keeps the really great art in a certain way underground in a certain way, and there's a specialness to that as well. And
for sure.
But there were so many things so many points that you went by that I almost wanted to stop.
I know. I'm sorry.
No,
I just like
great. It was great, and I'm trying to think. Oh, I wanted to ask you more about your mom and your dad too.
Yeah.
So what were they like?
My mom is like incredibly psychic.
Really?
And she's probably the reason that I even met Colonel Bruce. Oh yeah, like.
And you grew up in D.C.?
Southeast Washington, yeah. They're both New Yorkers. They were born in the Bronx. And when they started having kids, they wanted to get out of the city because it was just too crowded and too crazy. And so they came to Washington, D.C. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a social worker that worked with juvenile delinquents. And so they're both service people. My dad's religion was music. Like he tossed everything, but he was an extremely mystical person. And now my sister, who's totally psychic, Leilani, the older one, and now makes her living off of that.
Really?
Has started telling me how psychic my dad is. And I was like, I tried to reconcile him and my mom's relationship by just the whole yin-yang balance thing.
So you come from a blood family of mystics, really?
Well, now I'm finding out, like at 57 from my sister, but I should have known because of his connection to music. But he was so in his conscious mind, just
and what kind of music?
Angrily against it,
Was he a jazz person? What was he into?
All of it, but bebop was king. Miles Cohen, and he was there for all of that when it happened. He was born in 31.
I see.
So all that stuff from 45 on, like he was there for it.
In New York.
In New York.
Yeah.
When I gotta tell you some stories, geez, but. So I always played so much better when my dad and mom were in the audience because I knew they saw Miles trained, like dizzy, all this stuff.
Well, I didn't know that about your dad or you, and that even just hearing that one thing, that all these times where I've over the years I've enjoyed you and just looking up there and your vibe and the way you play. And it's so funny how it's so cool how just hearing that one thing about your dad, like kind of, this is now like it puts it into the context that it makes even more sense. I got it.
Especially with my brother too.
Oh, your brother, right.
Because my dad was a flute player.
Oh, really?
But he was too scared. He wanted to have a family and he didn't think he could make it as a musician. So he went the family route. Mm-hmm. And then they discovered my brother, Kofi.
Yeah.
Had perfect pitch when he was 7.
I've heard that.
So you can imagine, and this is again to the mystical part. So my dad's religion at this point is firmly music, especially jazz, right? He knows his son has this gift for the flute.
Yeah.
They find out by accident that he has perfect pitch. So here's my dad like, wow. I'm trying to think, how did you not believe in the mystical at that point? Because you find out your son is basically a Jedi at 7.
Right.
By 12, he was sitting in with jazz cats that came through town that we had on record, like Ron Carter.
How rare is that to have perfect pitch?
Extremely. Like I have great relative pitch. But Kofi said it's memory. And when I started playing banjo's tuned in G.
Okay.
And after going down the rabbit hole for 2 years on the banjo, I could always find a G and I could find every other note after that. And Greg Allman was the same way. I was like, do you have perfect pitch? He said, no, but I can always find an E because of Melissa. And then I can find every other note after that.
Really? Because Melissa was his anchor?
I was like, I think one of the first tunes he ever wrote.
Oh my God.
Like
can you imagine that's the first tune you ever wrote and that's the tune?
Oh, remind me to tell you a story about that later on. But, so for my dad, I was just like, Dad, and I talked to him after I had my mystical experience. I tried to start unpacking all this stuff. Coincidentally, the same thing happened to my youngest sister before me. And the older sister, not my older sister, but Adaro's older sister, like a year after me. So we thought for sure it was going to happen to Kofi because it was like Mom, Adaro, me, Leilani, and then Kofi. And then I thought Dad was going to be the last domino to fall, right? But my dad, I was like, Dad, how can you say you don't believe in anything mystical? What about Kofi? What about discovering your son had this superpower at 7 years old? Like that didn't. I said, what about Mom?
Right.
You know how psychic she is.
Right.
He goes, well. I said, come on, you don't believe me? No, I don't believe it. All I know is people shouldn't fuck with your mother. I was like, you can't say both of those things. Like something bad's going to happen to you if you mess with
him. Relating to it. He knew
But
it.
implicit in his
He knew
statement
it.
is that she's not going to do anything to you, but something bad, real bad, is going to happen to you.
She's not gonna do anything, but she could.
Well, he's seen it happen.
Right.
We all seen it happen.
There's a force field around her.
I don't even know if I should tell. You know? She can't be tried for murder. She didn't do anything, but that cat died like 6 months later.
Wow. Yeah.
Cancer, like that.
Oh my gosh.
And she told me, she said, if anybody's ever messing with you, and she would get this look, and I was like, uh-oh.
Wow.
She said, you don't ever do anything to them, ever.
Mm-hmm.
She said, you picture them as clear as you can, and then you picture them being obscured by a fog until you can't see them anymore. And I was like, okay, Mom.
Wow.
Dude was dead 6 months later.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not saying she did it, but, you know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's intense.
And my dad knows this. And I was like, you don't get to say that, Dad. You don't get to say, I don't believe in anything mystical. And then, but people shouldn't mess with your mama, you know, like. So he knew all the time.
Yeah, he just had a different way of relating to it.
He had pain. He was spiritually abused.
Ah, right. From religious,
I think it may be,
from religious abuse. Yeah.
It's one of the worst kinds of abuse.
I agree with that, man. That's why I really don't relate to religion at all, regardless of how I might look to some folks. But
well, the thing is, it's like everything else. You know, I love the debate we're having now. Everybody, religion is so bad and science is so this. And I go, if we look at what's endangering the earth more right now, is it religion or science? Right? And then, well, science doesn't do anything. It's what people do with it. Oh, but you don't cut that same slack to religion.
Yeah. I think
the Bible is songs and poems.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Stories and letters.
It's art.
It's art.
Yeah.
Like Alex Gray and Allison Gray say, they're works of art.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, now when we take them like that, there's a fountain that comes up.
Yes.
That, right? And all of the religions, except for the ones based on, you know, Vader.
Well,
right?
well, you know, I think of it more like vehicles because, you know, so much of us in the West, like, had kind of like either lackluster experience with our religions when we were kids or sometimes traumatic experiences with our religions.
Yeah.
But nowadays in my life, like, of course, I see the value of having a path that you follow. Like, I think of like people who, you know, lose a loved one too early, and and if they have Jesus, for instance, and they really have a genuine relationship with, say, Jesus, or, you know, pick your
right?
vehicle, like, it carries them across the suffering in a way that helps to keep the heart open, and that's beautiful.
Even transmutes it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so if it's, for me, it's like a vehicle, and we all have different vehicles that are going to suit us best for our life. I think of that with music as a vehicle. I think of like Bobby Weir and how he uses those songs and the characters in the songs as type of vehicles. I feel like that's a big part of why somebody like me can go to a Dead show. And I'm not, and yeah, I love the party of it too, and I love the social, but I'm there as really more for communion.
Exactly. It's a form of worship.
Yeah.
It's worth, I mean, playing music in the African tradition is a form of worship.
That's right.
That's where my dad worshiped.
Yes.
And that it was natural to him because of just growing up black.
Yeah.
And his people being from Mississippi, and my mom's from North Carolina. You know, I think it's, what do they call it? Epigenetic? Like where it's in your DNA, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get that. And that's what I want. I feel like they used to be together. Like in ancient times when the pyramids were built, it was the priests that were the scientists.
Oh, of course they were together.
You know, and then they separated, you know, alchemy from chemistry from alchemy, and astrology from astronomy, and physics from metaphysics. And, you know, they just like, they separated everything. And it's like, we got to get them back together, you know? We are. It's time. I feel like it's time.
I think it's happening. And, you know, a lot of these changes, of course, always happen through big time suffering, and we're going through that as a collective right now, big time suffering.
So can we look at it as birth pains, labor?
I certainly think it's that, there's a much darker way to think about it that a lot of people, I think about it where it's like all going to shit, because
I go there too
of course,
sometimes.
because that's the feeling. It's a legit feeling,
Legit.
But the question is, like, what is the nucleus of this whole thing? That's where I always come back to. And my feeling is always the nucleus of this whole thing is love. That's what all the that's the point of all of it. But however,
Yes.
you got to prove that to yourself. It's not enough for like someone else to say it, or for me to say it.
And you just answered the question. People always come to me, why would God let all this happen? I'm like, now who's the fundamentalist?
That's
Who
interesting.
said, why is God supposed to make us robots? Do I force my son Nigel to do it? First of all, I can't. I gave him life, and now he's free.
Do you force him to? What do you mean by that? Do you force him to do what?
Force him to not be evil, because people say, well, God, why would God let us have that? That's your fault. That's not God's fault.
Well, what is God even?
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So here's the problem. So when you come at me, and I'm not saying you, but when they come at me like that, I'm like, now you're being the fundamentalist. Who said that's God?
Right.
That's like the wrong view of God. And from my view of where I'm looking at the prism through, God is love. So where I find love, I could find it in any vehicle.
That's right. And you can find it in that bass guitar. You can find it in whatever, that's one of the things, like, what I'm super interested in is, like, the semantics I'll often use is, like, concentrating life force.
Yes.
And like, for instance, in your case, like, to a large degree, I say, like, when relatively speaking, the predominant energy of life is focused around a specific craft. So, for instance, being a musician, being specifically a bass player, and I know you play other instruments as well, but that's what seems like your main instrument, yeah?
Yeah.
And your main kind of vehicle. And so what I'm always interested in is what kind of wisdom has come to through your life via your craft. I'm assuming kind of like all of this to a certain extent. What is your experience with music and how it informs your sense of wisdom or your sense of spirituality and your art, essentially, your relationship to art?
It's funny because I don't have the like relationship to music. I used to feel guilty about it. But I think I've played music many, 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 many lifetimes. It comes easier to me than most.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying it
bragging.
just is what it is. Like, if I really practice hard, like, I get way down the road fast.
Yeah.
I'm like, sometimes I even told Butch's daughter, who was in school majoring in art history, I was like, I don't even think I'm doing art. Like, I would, if I was on an island, I would be playing anyway, just because it feels good. It's like a game. It's a pastime. It is a vehicle too. Like, when we play improvisational music with a group, there is this thing that happens where you all of a sudden you're almost kind of hands off, and you're just watching yourself play, and you're watching everybody be linked together. And that is a mystical, incredible thing.
Yeah.
As good as anything. So that as a feeling, just to know that, just as a psychedelic experience, right? As a mystical experience, it has such great value, especially growing up poor in Southeast Washington, and you can be in this world that's like heaven.
Right.
Right. It doesn't matter what your surroundings are. And certainly people had it a lot worse than us, but we grew up in Southeast Washington.
Yeah.
It was pretty rough,
Right.
And I think now at this age, because it also did not help me when I was having my worst problems.
Mm.
And I've seen people
You mean
worship music.
Music did not help you when you're having... Yeah, sure.
Treat it as a religion. I'm like, no.
Mm.
Especially after I had my mystical experience.
Mm.
I feel like music is one of the fruits that we get from the Creator, but it's not the Creator. It's not to be worshipped.
Mm.
It's a vehicle. It's one of the vehicles to be, and it's a practice. And yes, we train and we've, but it's all to get... And for people that just happen to be naturally good at it, how many of them did it not save them? Hendrix, Janis, like we could just go on and on and on right up until recent times.
Yep. Amy Winehouse. I was thinking of her the other day. Gosh, man, how great would it be to have Amy Winehouse around right now?
I mean, just so many, just friends that just recently suicided themselves. And it's just like... because that's not it. You have to get in touch with that divine thing. And once you get that, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
Money, no money, acceptance, no acceptance.
Yeah, it's like anything else. It's a vehicle that can take you in a variety of directions, of course. And it's powerful, too, because it's music, it's sound current, it's energy, it's really
So now
emotional.
I want to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to use it to convey the spiritual things that I see in conjunction with trying to explain the unexplainable with your mouth,
Hey, just a quick break from our conversation so I can tell you a little bit about the Comes a Time podcast. This is OTEIL and Mike's podcast. I listen to it myself. If you love good podcasts, I want to encourage you to go and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. It Comes a Time. I was just trying to think what's some of my favorite episodes. I've listened to a bunch of them. The one that jumped out first was the episode with Paul Stamets and Bobby Weir. There's episodes with all of OTEIL's bandmates from the dead. The Mickey Hart episode I really loved. There's another episode I love so much with another legendary bassist, Victor Wooten. There's so much good stuff in this podcast, and they're putting out episodes regularly. It's really a gem. So wherever you get your podcast, go subscribe to Comes a Time, and also Life Force Academy. If you haven't checked Life Force Academy out, hey, maybe now's the time. Maybe now's the time to get the good vitality in our body. Keep our life force circulating and flowing so the mind is in its relaxed yet clear intuitive space. We're connected to a genuine sense of purpose in our life. That's what Life Force Academy is all about. Feel good in your body, feel good in your mind, have the heart open, feel connected to a sense of purpose. If you go to lfa.yoga, you can just type that in, lifeforce.yoga or lfa.yoga, they both work. And that'll give you access to a 14-day trial for just $1. So that's Life Force Academy. Okay, everyone, back to the conversation. Has the experience with the dead in this phase of your life, since you've been playing with the dead, has that shaped your relationship with music? And how so? Can you articulate it at all?
Because there's so many things that are like just the way it all happened. Oh man, on so many levels I could answer this question. But I will say that, like the fact that I never really thought of myself as a singer, and now I'll sing at a Gillette Stadium and the crowd will go insane. And I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah, man.
Right? Like, how did that, talk about not being able to predict your life.
So with Dead and Company, this is the first time you were doing lead vocals in front of big crowds?
No, I sang ironically, the one song I used to sing with the Allman Brothers was Franklin's Tower.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but I never stepped up to the mic and sing the first line of Comes a Time.
Yeah, right. China
and the
doll.
entire stadium just go absolutely ballistic, right? That was, I was not ready for that. So then, I'm stepping into this new phase of my life in my 50s. Now I've come through all this spiritual stuff. I have a new wife. I have kids for the first time after having a vasectomy. Like everything is like completely like what's happening right
both kids post vasectomy?
Yeah.
Because I know you adopted the second one, but
we adopted Kavi, but Nigel's our biological. And what would my life have been without him? So I'm, sound check with Dead and Company. Nigel's crawling around trying to twist all the knobs on Bob Weir and Mayer's pedals. I'm like, no, I gotta stop, and it's just
That's
like,
great.
yeah. And all of that stuff informs the music that I'm playing. So there's like this whole story of where I came from and how I got over and get into this like incredibly mountaintop place. Yeah, it changes everything about every note I'm playing, every note that I'm singing. I'm really enjoying like being a beginner about things.
Wow.
Like when I picked up banjo, and now I realize so much of the fun is not being able to do something, and then when you get and you can do it, you're like, oh. And I see Nigel going through that, so I let him see me practice and not be able to do it right. And then, that quote I saw at his Taekwondo gym, it says, if you can't make a mistake, then you can't make anything.
Right,
I was like,
true enough.
yes, that's what I've been trying to tell Nigel. Thank you, Taekwondo gym. So let him see me making mistakes like that. So yeah, like getting the Dead Company, and then all the mystical, like, sorry about the vacuum.
It's all good, man. I'm so into what you're saying, I'm not even noticing it.
I think, like, I wonder what the tone is. Like, it's perfect for some reason, right?
It's just a drum.
Kofi could tell us what note it is. But, like, all this stuff is just, like, it's made the anomalous experiences that happened around the dead, the ESP, weird synchronicity, like, it's all been firing hard, really hard. Like a movie where your life becomes, like, a movie, it's crazy.
Yeah, I believe it, man. I believe it.
Good and bad.
Yeah.
Well,
that last tour y'all did was long, and I can only imagine because you obviously were running a really tight ship. And
that's the hardest tour I ever did, man.
I bet.
Well, we were flying private a lot so we wouldn't get COVID, and I told this story. I don't know if I told it on my podcast or the Patreon, but I've never been not seeing my kids for longer than 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
Because I just got lucky.
Yeah.
We had Nigel. I got the Dead and Company gig. They don't tour a lot.
Right.
And if it's more than 2 weeks, I get a tour bus and I bring them out.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's summer.
Yeah.
So then I had a year and a half home because of COVID.
Right.
And then we have this tour, and I'm gone 5 weeks straight, and they can't come because they can't get vaccinated yet.
Yeah. So the whole family,
and they were in
your
school,
right? Yeah, their kids.
And I couldn't come home. 6 days off, can't go home.
Right, because you got to stay in the bubble. COVID. Yeah.
4 days off here, can't go home.
So are you able to like hang with the bandmates much, or y'all just don't want
Everybody's
to?
separate. They're not even in the same hotels.
Really?
Me and Clementi and our tour manager and the sound man were in one hotel, and everybody's in a different hotel. So the isolation was
that's intense, man.
It was hard. And so I broke at the Four Seasons in Boston. We had 4 days off, 4 or 5. And I would order breakfast and go pick it up with my mask on and go eat on the bus because I just had to get out of the room.
Right? I understand.
And I'm in Boston at the Four Seasons, and I just burst out crying into my oatmeal. I just miss Jess and the kids so much. And I joked about it with friends. And then later that day, Miles Davis's nephew calls me. I think his name is Vince.
Oh, really?
And he's trying to get hooked up with the Dead. And because Miles and the Dead played, and Amazon wants to do a movie about it or something,
Cool.
I'm like, and we're talking, Charlie Watts had just died. He goes, oh, you know what? You're at the Four Seasons in Boston? I was like, yeah. He goes, I think the Stones are there. And I just was like, you're crying in your oatmeal in your $1 million tour bus at the Four Seasons in Boston and stay at the same hotel as the Rolling Stones. Wah, wah, wah. But
yeah, well, that doesn't really nourish that.
How many other people far more famous than me killed themselves doing heroin in some hotel room, feeling the same way because they didn't cry in their oatmeal.
Right.
Right?
I'm glad you cried in your oatmeal, brother. That's healthy, man. That's good. You should.
Right.
That's healthy.
And I felt so much better afterwards.
Yeah.
And talking about it and laughing about it with my friends. I think Kameni might have even come on the bus, but I was still trying to get coffee. And he's such a sweetheart. He gives me a hug. He's like, oh, brother, I know how much you miss your kids. Because they remember when Nigel was on tour with us and we had the Thomas the Train bus set up on the bus and stuff. And, it was... So, yeah, that tour was excruciating, man. It's the hardest tour I ever did. And I really hope we don't have to tour like that again.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. Sometimes I feel those really nice places amplify the loneliness when you're by yourself.
It does. When you think about the famous people, the more money, the more fame, the greater the gulf, the Grand Canyon of why.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I wasn't famous young.
Yeah, that's a motherfucker, right? I don't have judgments on anyone who've did some, I remember with Tiger Woods, and when he went through all that, when all that came out, it's like, man, I don't know what it's like to deal with that type of
Michael Jackson,
that psychological
who gets out alive
pressure.
And who gets out sane. You get one Betty White and one Dolly Parton for 10,000 other
That's great.
famous people that
That's so good.
They drove crazy. Because I always think about the Me Too stuff. I'm like, man, Dolly would be like, you want to hear some Me Too?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I know what a powerhouse of a human being she is.
She's so amazing, and it's but I start to think I used to be that way. Oh man, these guys, they. Still poop and got to put their pants on. No, man. When you were famous since you were a teenager and probably had a healthy heroin addiction or something of that magnitude while you're still no.
Yeah.
You have to cut them some slack. Their reality is not.
Yeah, just the psychological experience of celebrity in and of itself is enough to put somebody into, anything.
I mean, look what I'm not a churchgoer, but look what the Bible says about idolatry. The concept is that only God should be in that position. So if you're going to worship the wrong thing,
right? And
we got to unpack what worship means, right?
Yeah.
Because we're always hung up on semantics.
Yeah, I think it's always useful to unpack semantics.
If it's going in the wrong direction, it's bad for both people, the worshiper and the worshipee.
Right.
What did it do for Jerry?
That was exactly what I thought of, because you worshiped the wrong thing. You got caught up. You got stuck on Jerry. That's not the point of quote unquote worship.
It's what Bruce Lee said.
Yeah.
He said the finger pointing at the heavenly bodies. You got stuck on Jerry's finger, right?
Right.
And you missed the heavenly bodies. What he was pointing at.
Yeah. What was coming through him, and what is the same thing that actually is coming through you, And that's why I say communion, because it's the whole. That's why, as much of work it is to go to even as a fan, for me to go to a Dead show, I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love being with all the people, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of people to deal with, and I love it enough that I'll go, and in fact go many shows in a row. But there is this work that's involved in I just want to be in the field of the music, and I only want to, mostly why I'm there personally. But there's so much beer, so everybody's talking loud as a motherfucker, and you can't hear it, and so it's a little bit of, but that's part of it. That's part of the work that you have to do to get into the medicine,
That's why I think it's the concept of creative tension. That yin yang, there has to be the dark, like you said, so we can prove to ourselves.
Yes.
That's why
you have to
God
verify,
or whatever,
you have to
the point of life.
For yourself,
That's right. That's what this freedom is for. We are not robots. You want to know why something's wrong? Because we didn't do enough to change it. We have a grand opportunity. And so our lesson, how it is. You have a huge awakening and you want everybody to get it, but plants bloom at different times. And it's you have to let that be for you and then shine it forth, and then it will take root at whose ready to sprout at that time, but you try to save your family, your friend, you try to help them see, not save them, but help them see what you see. They're trapped in the same thing you were trapped in.
Yeah.
And you want to help them get out. If it's not their time, it's so frustrating, man.
Yeah, that's
but
why
you have to let that be for you,
That's why I think proselytizing is, so obnoxious because it's like everything like you said, everything has its own time. And furthermore, everything is based on just our personal experiences. Like philosophy is not worth very much unless unless it's aiding in me actually having more love, me actually having more happiness in my life, me actually feeling more deeper sense of purpose and connectivity to the people in my life and the people that I don't even know. And just like all of life and beings, and just be in the mystery of it. And to me, that's why I love it. And that's what music, so in a certain way, like I could say music is my religion in a certain way, because to me personally, and we all have our vehicles, that is how I connect into the infinite more easily, and just like, whereas this is exactly home for me.
Yeah. And I dig it as that. I mean, it is that for me now. But it wasn't before.
Really?
Because I didn't have it. I didn't have my relationship. I didn't love myself.
I see.
I had to learn how to love myself from love. Love had to teach me.
Yes.
Like I didn't realize.
That's so cool.
Okay,
that's so beautiful how you said that.
That's how, and that's how our podcast was born. Me and Mike talked, and he said, I told him about the experience that I had, and he said I had a crazy experience, and I was hypnotized, and
Mike was?
the hypnotherapist took him back to a place where he was really hurt when he was younger, and said, now can you replace that bad situation with a good situation? He said all of a sudden this light hit him, and he's like, I don't know how to describe it other than I feel like I met love, and I just had an arrow shot through my heart. I was like,
wow,
you had the thing. Okay, you and me, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And eventually we started our podcast to talk about that.
That's really
It ended up being like music and comedians, but it always comes back to that.
That's what it is about. I've listened to enough of them to verify that. That's what you guys are
the mental
about.
Health and all of it. It all comes back to this love thing, and that is my God.
There you go.
Right. And I can find that through where I find it through any religion or other, because I sympathize with the people. How many people I know from people I went to church with, that so many people have not had a mystical experience. I actually give them credit for going on faith, not having experienced it. But the ones that were able to do that, and I feel the right way without having the mystical experience, did, because they understood two things: love and grace.
Right.
And if you get that intellectually and even like a mustard seed's worth of spiritually, you're good.
I think so too. Grace is, I think, something that most everyone does experience. We may not contextualize it that way, but we experience it.
But we do.
I was just listening to the, I love this. I don't know. Have you ever listened to the Joseph Campbell interviews with Bill Moyer?
A couple.
Yeah.
One.
They're really.
I got kind of pissed at him one time, actually. But
that's funny.
We'll talk about that, because I'd like to ask you about that, since you probably know more about Campbell than I do.
Well, he just had, Bill Moyer's just, I thought, beautifully. I think he's a great interviewer, and
Me too.
He said, have you ever? I can't remember exactly, but have you ever had experiences where you've been helped by a hidden hand? And he's like, all the time, and they go on, and I think that's what grace is in a certain way. We might not contextualize it like that. We might just kind of not even notice it so much, but we feel it. And I think it's happening all the time. And the more you're aligned and kind of attuned to it, the more you're now not only noticing it, but enjoying it.
If you're alive and you don't have cancer, right now. Like you're experiencing grace right now.
There you go. Yeah.
You have life. You have this amazing. You should just be on your knees thanking something, like like what an incredible thing. So all of it is grace.
Yeah, well
But
said.
our awareness, there's a great one of my favorite mystics and scholarly minds is this guy Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Oh yeah, I know Abraham Joshua Heschel. I got my dad his book for his last birthday last year.
God in Search of Man.
That's what I got him, God in Search of Man.
He says it's our wonder. We've lost our sense of wonder.
Exactly that.
We've replaced this knowledge, the thirst for knowledge, for the appreciation of wonder.
Yes.
Of the wonder of things. And I was just like, I've read so many of his quotes in Christian theology books. I was like, who is this guy? And then I see pictures of him marching with Martin Luther King. And then my theology mentor had just passed away, turned me on to that book, God in Search of Man. And oh, man.
Really? So when did how long ago was that when you read it?
Like 40 years old. And I'm 57.
Oh, so right around that
and then,
same time.
it's really fun. After that, most black people, a lot of them don't know where they come from because your roots are obscured by slavery. Well, my dad's brother did this genealogical search with the Mormons who have all these genealogy records and found out that we're from Nigeria on my dad's side, and we're a tribe called the Igbo, who are also known as the Black Jews of West Africa.
Oh,
So this is why I'm deep into Heschel, God in Search of Man, Heavenly Torres refracted through the generations, the prophets, like all these. I'm deep, highlight, right? And I'm like, I'm Jewish, but only on my dad's side, so it doesn't get to be.
No, man,
I don't get to count it.
You're part of the club, man.
But it's in my DNA. Like you can't take that from me. Like it's so. I moved to Atlanta from Birmingham. We're so far from the airport that I needed a driver. So I had this car service, and my driver was this guy named Johnson, who was clearly African. So finally, I'm like, Johnson, what's your real name? He said, Johnson. I was like, what's your last name? He said, Ndukwe. I was like, ha. Johnson Ndukwe, where are you from? He said, Nigeria. I said, oh, I just found out I'm from Nigeria. He said, really? I said, yeah. My people, I told him the story about the Mormons. I said, my dad says we're a tribe called the Igbo. He says, I'm Igbo. I was like, oh, yeah. All right. I said, is it true that you guys are Jewish? He said, well, they say that, but they can't prove it. I was like, all right. So I start investigating. I said, what do you guys eat? So he lists all this stuff, yams, chicken. He lists off like 5-10 things. I was like, no pork? He said, we've never eaten pork. I was like, then I find out after talking with them, they started circumcising way before the Christian era. I'm like, you guys are Jewish.
You're Jews.
Yeah. So I met another Igbo cat the other day, and he's like, yeah, for sure. So it was just weird, the timing. It's one of those anomalous things where you're like, okay,
Well, of course, like it makes sense. Like, it makes more sense that there would be Jews and Israelites, ancient Hebrews in West Africa than in the United
look
States.
at the Falasha, or they don't like to be called that, but the Beta Israel, but the Ethiopian, they didn't even know about Hanukkah. That's how old they are. They were like, we missed Hanukkah.
Yeah, well.
That's how long they've been doing it. So that some of them obviously went over and, it's cool. So all my Jewish friends, I'm like, hey, man, I'm a Hebrew.
That's good, man.
That's our joke. So yeah, I don't know. It's like it's crazy. Like this whole journey, of, like ending up in the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead, where like you would think the last place like a religious person. I don't know. Every religion would consider me a heretic, but. Well, whatever.
Yeah, you are a heretic from their perspective, but that's fine. Like that's a good thing to be because it means you're going against the grain.
A rabbi told me once, he said, if you really want to learn about a religion, you got to study the heretics. I was like,
for sure. Yeah, because all the mystics were categorized that way. The witches and everything.
Love won't be put in that box, man. Those boxes.
That's what I think's so cool about, characters like Colonel Bruce and all. Like, to me, that's where it's like in the arts is where in our society is where you get the mystics. Because, like in India, for instance, there's an ancient culture that holds, space for all sorts of varieties of mystics and various facets of life. It seems like in, say, modern, like, American culture, most of our mystics are traveling through the arts. Like, I mean, you were talking about, like, Sun Ra and all that, but even, like, John Lee Hooker and...
It's the same time.
Yeah.
Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, Sun Ra, like, it all came together for sure. And those were the shamans. Those were the...
Yeah, and they're all around. And, like, I wonder who's out there. Like, I think Kendrick Lamar, for instance. And I see these young...
Yeah.
Like, these
Flying Lotus.
Yeah, man. These are mystics, and they're real great artists. And to me, that's where, like, the richness of everything is. And coming kind of full circle back to what we were talking about earlier with art and with spirituality and everything, I find it's everywhere, and it's in everything.
Yeah.
And
it's the one thing that really, I am so not a nationalistic person because I never felt like my country had my back. But at this later age, it really makes me appreciate America, because America was supposed to, as far short as it fell, was supposed to represent that freedom to go out and make your own way. And so the Grateful Dead and that whole movement, jazz, and that whole, the blues, the music, the arts, where we just were able to, like, I'm not agreeing to your matrix, and I'm going to step out of this and make my own path following this vehicle that I'm following.
That's
right. And then you get these musics that could only have been created here.
Right.
Like, if you didn't have slavery, you wouldn't have country, bluegrass, blues, gospel, jazz. You would have none of it.
Yeah. The whole thing.
No Grateful Dead.
No
Allman Brothers. No nothing. No Cream. No Rolling Stones. No nothing. Like, this horror story and incredible, beautiful, triumphant Shakespearean biblical story that it also is produced these incredible things.
Yeah.
Like, that's mystical, man. That's powerful.
It is, and it's it flips the mind, because that juxtaposition of, the greatest of horror, the darkest to the most fantastic, and then somehow they're all existing within the same space. Well, that has to say, how do you not be a mystic? Because how in the world are you going to make sense of any of this?
That's what I'm saying.
And
the logical mind. How does the logical mind make sense of it?
Yeah, you can't. There's just you can't. You have to, like, how do you make, so anyways, you could go over so many examples of that, but you can't.
No, thank God. I mean, I'm so glad that I found, and my mom had Be Here Now. I remember that book, and the pandemic, I went through the audio book that were all the lectures that he gave that ended up becoming Be Here Now. And then the book that he wrote while he was dying.
Oh, yeah.
I've listened to those on audiobook, and that got me through it. My mom had that stuff back then. Colonel Bruce gave me Krishnamurti and the Book of the Tao, the first two books he ever gave me.
Oh, really? Krishnamurti?
I was so out of sorts to try to help me sort it out, And the Book of the Tao, man, still, like, when I really just want my immediate go-to, I go to that one. That translation by Stephen Hastings, I think it is, man, the Tao that's some stuff right there, dude.
It definitely is. I love it. Simple and so deep, but simple.
That's a lot of Colonel Bruce. The 10,000 things. He used to quote so many things people thought were nonsense, and I was like, he got that. That's him. That Lao Tzu,
And we need a Colonel Bruce documentary. It seems
there
like.
Is one.
Is
You've
there?
Got to see it.
Really?
It's called Basically Frightened.
Okay. Oh, really? Basically, I got to watch it.
All the craziest stuff that he told me was all true, and all the little stuff was all lies. It's like in that documentary, I saw it, and I was like, oh my! And the people who it happened to were much older now. Were telling the story, and he had told me these stories when I was young, and I was like, oh my God, all that stuff is true. It's like 100 unbelievable things. You got to see it. I think you may be able to see it on YouTube, but it's called Basically Frightened.
I'm gonna find it.
Amazing. Yeah, it'll get you.
I wanted to ask you before we go, what was it like adopting a girl? I mean, it looks amazing, but what's it like adopting a girl from India?
It's such a trip, man. Like I didn't see it happen that way because I made a dear friend down here who lived here before we moved here named Jeff Caskey, who's done 1,600 adoptions.
Wow.
And me and my wife talked about adopting even before we got married.
Okay.
And so when we decided we wanted to do it, I was like, well, I'll call Jeff. And he was like, I'll get you a mixed baby the day it was born. I'll smooth the runway. I was like, sweet, we got the guy right here at home.
That's cool.
And then Jess sees this movie on a plane called Lion.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful movie. Oh, my gosh.
And dude, she was like, she's just crying. I'm like watching something else, and she's just gone. She's like, you got to see this movie. I'm like, okay, So then she watches it again. Then she watches it again. Then she gets the book, reads that 3 times. And I'm like, So finally, like international adoption is hard.
It is. Yeah, I imagine it is. Yeah.
And Jeff didn't do India. He's done Ukraine. He's done Russia. He's done China, India. And every country's different.
I see.
So it ended up being a really difficult process, but she was sure. And I was like, if your heart is sure, then this is what we're doing. And so we did it. Took us 2.5 years to get her, and we got her 5 months. We finally just went over there because we had heard about people it took 3 years or more. So we went over there to just try to push it, and thank God because COVID hit right after that.
Wow.
She would have been trapped there she'd probably still be there.
How old was she when you got her?
She was 1.5 when we finally got her.
Wow.
It took us a year to get to the point where we could adopt, just start choosing kids. And then it took another year and a half from then. And it's been amazing. Her personality, she will be the leader of something. Like, you can't even get mad at her because she just doesn't understand why she can't be in charge. Like, she's a born leader. Right. And she's just looking at you like I'll never forget. She was so little when we brought her home. She was malnourished and very short. And I was, she was doing something and I said, no. And she looks up at me. She goes, shh.
Oh my gosh.
Teeny. It's like, you're so ballsy and just brave. Like,
wow.
You don't care. She's like, you be quiet. I was like, wow.
How do you handle that? You just have to you have to flow with her, huh?
Her principal at her school, all her teachers, everybody's like, whoa.
Wow.
You got one on your hands. I'm like, so it's not just me. They're like, oh no. It's not just you. So everybody knows it.
Yeah,
people are like, how is she adjusting? I'm like, adjusting? How are we adjusting?
She came and
she
took
is
over.
Running this
She's the queen.
Dude, she's the empress. Like the queen's down here.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's so beautiful. But her smile just lights up like when she's on fire. And when you go back and you see the pictures from when we first got her, it's just, again, how can you not believe in something mystical to see this miracle of love, just love and some nutrition.
Yeah.
And now she'll be running this place, dude. I'm telling you, watch. Nobody will be surprised. Nobody.
That's really cute.
She's something.
Well, appreciate you coming on, man. I had like 100 questions that I didn't even get to one, but
sorry, that's because of me. Always like,
I just enjoyed it, man. Enjoyed it right out the gate, and
me too, man. Yeah, I remember. Yor McAlkinen from Hot Tuna.
Yep.
He did, I think it was like 4 hours or something on Sirius. And I know from teaching at his music camp what an incredible storyteller he is, and he got sober, and it's just, he's amazing. And so I love long podcasts, and I take it a little at a time, and somewhere a couple hours into it, he said, sorry about the tangents, but he goes, hey, life is in the tangents. And I thought, never feel bad about going on a tangent anymore, because it's such a true,
I like that
accidental road that you've,
that's how,
and you're like pissed off about it, and then you're like so glad afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, it's like being in the flow of life, and not being planning so much and so structured. Allow the Venus energy to just take you.
The Venus. So look, this is great, because then you come on my podcast, I'll have to come back on yours to fish. I'll shut up and let you ask me the question.
Yeah, let's.
You want to ask me?
For sure. That would be great.
Because I need the astrology stuff. I want to know for like the Vedic. So I'll hit you up.
Yeah, hit me up. I would
email, because I need to know my Vedic chart.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll give you the download from that angle. It's cool.
Absolutely,
it's cool. It's real powerful.
No, I need all angles, man.
Yeah.
It's getting crazy out here.
Yeah,
we need to be able to zoom out and see what's going on, because it's dicey right now.
It helps me a lot. Going back, like we said, you can go into a real dark place of what's going on. But again, if you have that bigger mythological language, I know you had that guy, I can't remember his name, who came on your podcast a couple weeks ago, the mythologist.
Michael Mead.
Michael Mead, that was great.
Yeah.
But having that,
great.
That's what astrology does for me as well, is because Vedic astrology is all largely taught through the Vedic myths. And
good. So I can learn. I have this book. Where is it? My buddy got me. I think it's the Ramayana.
The Ramayana.
I'm Ramayana. I don't know the pronunciation, but I'm trying to get more into that.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's so rich. I mean, it's just like the language of nature, the language of life, language of love, language of all of it, the dark and the good and the bad.
All of it.
So you have that mythological language in a difficult time like this. It really helps perspective, and it'd be like, maybe at the nucleus, this thing, it is all love. It's wanting to be born. It
has to be. I mean, how do you know love without the other one? That's how you know. Like when you go back to talking about, I have to prove it to myself. I did. I had to prove to myself that I was not God. And when I did, then the mystical forces were there to help me. They're like, you finally came to the end of it. And here we are.
That's crazy, man. That's a crazy story. This is really cool.
And the grace was that they didn't go, what took you so long?
Sure. You're right on time.
They were just like, we got you.
Yeah.
Come here, my long lost son. Wow. It was me the whole time. Jeez. It's beautiful.
Yeah, brother. Awesome. Well, thank you, OTEIL, man.
Thank you, man. I can't wait to have you on our podcast. And
looking forward to
that. We need people like you, man. I'm so glad as this great evil rises up, the great chaos, I see the great love rising up too. So
definitely.
You've been a big help to me through the pandemic, and I just thank you for just shining your light, man.
That's cool to hear, brother.
We need it now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, feelings mutual, man. This really I know that last tour was hard, but for me and I know many others, like jumping on a handful of shows, it was just like, it was like coming to the point where, man, that helped a lot to just dance and to remember and to just be in it, and it really fuels me. I come back from that and I'm good to go for a while. So I appreciate
that recharge,
the work, and I know the big sacrifice it is. So
well, we get it back too.
I'm sure
from you guys. I mean, we could feel that, so we appreciate it. The work that you got to go through, actually, even at the show, just getting to the show and all the craziness.
Yeah.
But it does. That last tour was the first time we never had a bad night.
Well, I was gonna. That was one of the questions I was gonna ask you. Was because that was my sense. Because I listen. If I'm not there, I listen to them. And
thank you.
Yeah, man. And I mean, I love the old stuff, but I love what's happening right now. I love what's being born right now. And and it just seemed that way to me. I don't think I'll ever really have a bad night, but I know I have musicians in my family, so I know not to go backstage right after the show, because I had a fucking amazing time. I was like, that was killer, and then go back and talk to them, and they're all downers. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna stay out here where everyone loved it. But
That's right.
but that's what I sensed on this tour, was like, man, it was really like, that was y'all's, I guess it was like your release valve too, when you're in all that isolation the whole time.
And we thought everyone might be the last one.
Yeah, right. I
Like
always
every
feel that
day
with
you're
Dead
like,
Company.
oh yeah, Foo Fighters just canceled.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
right, I
this
see what you
band just
mean.
canceled. This band just canceled. You're like, so you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
So if you could just get through this show, it's like you got away with another one. The key is, can we play like that when there's no pandemic?
Yes,
Because it really is no different. You don't know when your last show is.
that's right. I always feel like that, especially with Dead and Company. We're being blessed by the elders in Dead and Company. And
For sure. But I mean, I could be the first one to die in Dead and Company.
Of course.
Like, who knows?
That's always true.
And so I try to bring that, like, can I do that every night? Mayor's good at that. Mayor's really good. I had one night where a massive migraine got me. It was like at Red Rocks. It was like 30 some degrees.
I was there,
and
man.
The second half after Drums in Space, I just had to sit on the amp and just try to get
really?
through it.
That was night
my
2?
fingers were frozen and I had a migraine. It was the second night
Yeah.
at Red Rocks.
Did you like how was a couple shows after in Denver, the 2 nights after that?
Oh yeah, it was a lot warmer.
Yeah, like that, because you would thought, I went to those 4. I flew out for those, and you would think, of course, Red Rocks is Red Rocks, but oh my God, I had so much fun at those Denver nights.
Oh yeah, what was that place called?
Fiddler's Green or something like that.
Fiddler's Green. That was those were great,
Great
because it was so
shows.
much. It was like in the 50s instead.
I know. Normally that would be cold, but we had the contrast of Red Rocks 2 nights before.
Officially the coldest show I've ever played.
Really?
And the first night was good. I could not believe we had such a good show. We would have had another good one if that migraine hadn't got me. I mean, the band was still great, but I didn't
notice,
migraine
man.
just got me.
Yeah, I didn't even notice anything. I thought it was a great night.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you go, man. I know I keep...
No, man. All good. Yeah, I could keep going too, but we'll just do it again.
Let's, man.
Yeah.
Bless you, brother.
Likewise, my man. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening today. Thank you so much, OTEIL, for being on the podcast. An honor and a pleasure. Thank you to everyone at the Life Force Academy for helping to make these possible, and thank you to all of you who are listening. If you haven't already subscribed, we have some real cool things coming up soon. Make sure wherever you listen to your podcasts, subscribe. If you are feeling inspired and would leave us a rating or review, it really does help, and we would really appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to leave you with some music today. This was recorded at the Life Force Academy Immersion 2021, June, in the foothills of Northern California, Sierra Nevada. This is the Simrit Band, SIMRIT. If you don't know them, you got to look them up wherever you listen to your music. This is a Life Force Academy exclusive. Be released soon. Enjoy, everyone. Have a great, great day. Devin Ashley on percussion. And Jared May on bass. Shannon Lee Hayden, electric cello. Salif Bamakora on the kora. And Simrit on the vocal.